Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. My name is Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today I'm going to be speaking to Filippo Gramigna from Onetag. But before we do that, if I could just say a big thank you to the team at Lumen Research who sponsor this podcast. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an eye tracking technology company that help brands to plan, buy, measure and optimize towards real human attention, thus increasing ROI. So thanks again to the team at Lumen. And Filippo, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you for being here. We're just saying, probably by the time this comes out, it'll probably be raining again. But it's one of the hottest days of the year, and we're sat inside. So let's wind this up and get out into the sunshine, shall we? Yeah. Seriously, though, thank you very much for coming on. Much appreciated. Just to kick us off, as is traditional, could you just give us a bit of a potted history of your career to date, please?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in media and tech for almost 25 years now, so it shows a little bit my age, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, I started my career actually in Italy, where I'm from, working for as a journalist. Actually, I was actually reading the news live on an independent radio station, and then I moved into.
This is all very natural for you then, like a microphone.
It felt natural, but it's always a little bit nervous in the beginning. It feels a little bit coming back to my early days, and then I started to work for magazines divisions in Italy for big media houses. Newspapers, so the old media world. And then I had a couple of years of independent freelancing just to understand how to pivot into something more interesting, actually, with a different type of pace. And I stumbled into interesting companies that were launching new initiatives in Italy. And the company was called Y-Space, was at the time the first one who was really advanced in the rich media on mobile phones. So I started I jumped straight from offline into programmatic without going into desktop. So I went straight into mobile. And then fast forward, I worked for many different ad tech companies. I moved with the family a few years ago in Sweden, where I lived for a few years in Stockholm, which was a fantastic experience from a family perspective, but also work perspective. And then I moved to London 6 years ago. So I moved. My career actually basically spans between publishers, agency, ad tech companies. I try to cover pretty much the whole spectrum of the ad tech space.
I always think it's really interesting to speak to people that have seen it from every side, because there's obviously a lot that goes on within an agency that people outside an agency wouldn't know, and then the same in a publisher. And if you've kind of seen it from both sides, it does help.
A lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to map who needs what, when, and how.
Exactly.
And
exactly. You understand the different perspectives, because there's not just one way of doing things, right? You need to understand the different type of agendas that people usually have, and this helps a lot to really understand how to operate in the space.
Yeah, for sure. So Onetag, so co-CEO?
Co-CEO, yeah. I started a couple of years ago with Onetag. I already knew the founder, Daniel Pirchio, who is a fantastic young entrepreneur. He's been launching this company 10 years ago, actually. So he's now 31, and he was 21 years ago when he launched the company. So really, really an amazing journey on his side. And he bootstrapped the company since the beginning. He never got any VC money. So when I really looked into this company, I was really impressed, because it sounded like a very different type of journey from all the major plays that I'm usually looking at. So super profitable company, very lean approach, an Italian company with a global scalable reach, which is absolutely unique. I think we are the only Italian company who has a global footprint in terms of business in programmatic. And I saw that there was a fantastic opportunity to help the company to scale internationally. And that's why I joined. I joined as a chief operating officer. And then after a few months, we realized that actually we could divide and conquer somehow. So he's really the tech guy, the tech and product guy, and more the commercial and operations person. So we could definitely complement each other and try to really have a laser-focused approach in the way we do business, and try to keep the company lean in terms of operations and try to scale even further. Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
So in terms of how would you describe Onetag? What does the business do? Who do you do it with? How do you do it?
Yeah. So the journey of Onetag is also pretty interesting. The company started as a DSP, as a demand-side platform back in the days in 2015 in Italy. But after a short period of time, the company started to realize that actually the DSP approach was not ideal because it was a lot of burn and learn in terms of really understanding what type of supply was the right one in order to provide outcomes. After maybe a year or two or something like that in Italy, Daniel has stumbled into a great opportunity of working with one of the largest clients in the world, Procter & Gamble. At that time, Audience Science, who was already servicing Procter & Gamble, went out of business. And then so Italy actually was looking for a new partner who could potentially service this big advertiser. And actually Daniel basically got the opportunity, built from scratch a new generation of exchange, basically providing the right inventory with a very advanced technology to optimize the inventory, looking at the buyer's KPIs. At the time, the typical SSP were pretty much dumb pipes. They were basically just connected inventory and basically let the DSP burn and learn what was good. And the Onetag approach was different in that sense because they tried to really understand what the outcomes of the buyers was and try to optimize the inventory based on viewability, multiple dimensions of a single impression, and try to do that job. The project lasted for a couple of years. Obviously, Procter & Gamble then consolidated all the approach at a more international level, and the company was too small to service the company, the Procter & Gamble at a global level. So the approach was then, okay, let's go big and let's try to build a global exchange, an SSP that was able to scale internationally. And the way Daniel and the tech team tried to scale the proposition was by having a very strong approach in terms of infrastructure. Working in programmatic means you need to manage a lot of data. A lot of data means a lot of cost. So if you have a very advanced technology that actually can scale massively at the global level by keeping costs low, it actually gives a great advantage. And the second pillar has been always a very advanced traffic shaping. So the ability to really reduce the waste, the irrelevant inventory, and try to funnel to the DSP only what's actually supposed to convert at the end of the day. Yeah. And this helped the company to scale in a matter of a few years to becoming a global player with more than 2,000 publishers integrated globally, more than 50% of the revenue and inventory out of North America, 5,000, I think, advertisers buying our inventory at the global level every day. So it's pretty sizable business right now.
So you spoke for a few minutes there about what you do without mentioning curation once. I think that's a record.
Yeah.
Purpose,
no, actually, curation is at the center of what we do. We started a curation approach without curation being even a word at the time. That's why it's funny now that everyone is talking about something that we have been doing for 10 years. We have been pioneering this approach since the beginning. We launched a curation platform 2 years ago, actually. It's a self-service platform that's basically, it's vertically integrated into the global exchange. And this helps, obviously, our clients, advertisers, to basically have full control of their campaigns, their deals, by using all our technology that we provide to them. So curation for us is definitely something that is the central pillar of our approach. We do it algorithmically behind the scenes, and we do it also manually using the platform that we provide to our advertisers.
Okay. So you've been doing something for ages that now's got a new name.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you define curation when you're talking, let's say, to the buy side? How do you define the benefit of curation, or what is it even?
No, exactly. So I think before defining curation, what we usually do and try to educate the market on is what curation is good for, why curation is important, and why curation is not just a buzzword that actually comes and goes. I think there are three main challenges that the market is facing. So when programmatic has been created, the main purpose has been always to try to automate the process of selling and buying ads, which is fantastic and it's happening, but it brings a lot of complexity. And this complexity has been still going and going. And in this type of ecosystem, I think most of the times the players tend to overlook the central point, which is outcomes. So at the end of the day, what advertisers want is outcome. What the buyers, sellers want is to have, obviously, a good representation of their inventory. And so there are three areas where we think curation can really solve real problems. The first one is the amount of cost and complexity that the technologies involved are supposed to handle, in particular the DSPs. The DSPs have QPS, QPS allocation. So it's query per second. It's a limited amount of traffic they can listen per SSP that they work with. And this actually limits their ability to understand where to buy and how to buy. Hence the proposition I said before, the burn and learn approach. Yeah. And this is the first problem. So a problem of complexity and amount of cost. The second one, which I think is even more interesting and important, I always like to make this parallelism, which is almost like going into a shop. You are a buyer, you go into a shop, a grocery shop, you want to buy a product. And you don't find the labels with the ingredients on the product you want to buy. This is actually what happens in most of the times when it comes to the placements of the inventory. The buyers don't know what they're buying until they buy it. Once they buy it, they understand if this placement, this inventory, this impression, this user is good or bad. And so I think this is a mismatch between the seller and the buyer, where the buyers are flooded by irrelevant stuff that comes their way without really understanding what is good and what is bad. And the result of that is that there is a huge amount of waste. I mean, I think the latest ENA report a couple of years ago said there was a 38 billion of wasteful inventory. So wasteful means IVT traffic, so bots, non-viewable inventory, so stuff that is really irrelevant. And
isn't any ad call that doesn't get filled technically waste?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's why curation is important, because curation, especially when it comes to a curation where, as I said before, a platform that is vertically integrated into an exchange. An exchange is directly connected to the inventory. So an exchange and a curation platform all together, they listen to the old traffic. Basically, all the 2,000 publishers that we are connected with, they all send all their traffic to us. And then we decide what is good and what is bad. But the approach is in real time, first of all, that we use AI, machine learning, that actually continuously improve the understanding of what the publisher sends to us. I think we filter around 60% of the inventory that we get, because it's not good, and we take it out. And out of this 40% that stays, only a portion of that actually goes to the DSP, because we look at historical data. And the typical approach of an exchange is, you are a DSP, I am an SSP. I give you what you buy from me. So I give you more of what you buy, typically. But this is a very linear approach. Like, it's only backwards looking. It's not predictive, right? We baked this approach having also on top a prediction engine, basically a recommendation system that tries to understand and predict on top of the historical data also what could potentially convert looking at the future. And these two engines combined are really giving a real advantage, because the DSP have a fast return on investment. They basically burn and learn much faster. They basically get an optimized bit stream of impression that they can actually take benefit of.
Okay, so for those that are not sort of deep in the weeds of ad tech, then, so how is this different? What are the benefits over and above a PMP? Because a lot of what you're saying there, to my simple mind, is that, okay, so you're taking the very best inventory that you want and putting it together and only sending that to the DSP. Is that not similar to a deal ID with a PMP?
So the PMPs are, in our view, are more like a static type of approach, where a buyer and a seller get in touch and they basically transact. So it's a great baseline to start a transaction between a seller and a buyer, but it's more like a static type of approach. So the PMP gives access to the supply for a buyer. Curation actually moves beyond that type of approach. It's much wider, it's more dynamic, it's aggregated, it tends to enrich the impression that the seller gives to us with more data, more metadata. So that's, I think, really important, because every single impression has multiple dimensions. And if the engine that actually promotes that inventory to the DSP is able to add more enriching data on top of that. For example, we have a proprietary semantic engine that basically scrapes all the pages of the publishers and basically adds additional level of information on top of that. Okay. And this actually gives more information. We use attention scores, obviously, to give information on top of that. And we also use performance data in order to try to, again, predict what type of impression could perform on top of that. So I think the approach is wider, is deeper, and is in real time. So it basically tries to help the publishers to promote and present their inventory in a more dynamic and better way than not just having a static type of and linear approach like a PMP.
Okay, and do publishers typically see a higher sell-through rate on the inventory that they send you? Because while you remove some of it because it's not what the buyers want, but you enrich what's left, they still end up making more money essentially.
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of debate and it's always good to have debates around something because it helps to understand, as we said before, the different type of angles and perspective of the players involved in something new that is coming, like curation. Typically, the first reaction of publishers, because publishers I've been on the publisher side for many years, so I really understand their concerns when a new technology comes in, when a new proposition comes in, that they tend to be afraid of losing control, and that someone is actually taking advantage of all the work that has been done by the journalists, by the photographers, by the authors on the publisher side, without recognizing the value of that, right? But I think curation, in this sense, we have data that proves that curation brings additional value. First of all, we have tracked that curation has increased the bid density by 25%. Bid density basically means the amount of competition that there is on a single impression. So 25 more bids competing on a single impression means that there is, by result, higher CPMs, 20% higher CPM for publishers. And also, at the end of the day, it means that curation means more diversified and additional revenue, which complements what the publisher does. And ultimately, also, publishers it's a very generic word, right? I mean, we typically don't talk about publisher, we talk about supply partners, because there are multiple different breeds of supply partners. There are the typical, tier one publishers, the very recognized brands in the market. There are resellers, there are publisher networks, different type of breeds of aggregation of supply. And based on the type of supply, there is different type of outcomes potentially for them, right? So, and we understand the different nuances of this type of supply that we can get. We always tend to go direct at the source of the supply, because this is actually provides better outcomes for the buyers. But at the end of the day, the publishers that have already a sales force, they typically work more in a PMP type of approach, right? A more one-to-one with the buyers. The remnant inventory that they typically don't use could be aggregated on a curation proposition, and this could provide a complementary revenue stream for them.
Yeah. So there's especially with attention scores and things like that. I've often thought that I started on the publisher side as well, so I can feel that pain, but I wonder if there's little pockets of inventory that are really valuable to buyers, but sellers don't know because it's not badged up in the right way and presented to buyers in the right way. It might be, so with attention scores, for example, it might be on the crossword page or on the puzzle page where they don't think that's very premium because no advertiser ever really asked them for it. But actually when you put it in and then you put all of the data across it and you go, wow, that's amazing. That's getting like 30 seconds of attention.
Exactly. Yeah. The type of engagement, and this is exactly what I was mentioning before. So curation, when it's done right from an algorithmical standpoint, when it's done at placement level, so placement by placement, it means that you can unlock valuable impressions, valuable users that are engaged in niche portions of the inventory that typically are not valued, as you said before, right? And this could be valuable for sections of domains of big publishers. It could be valuable as a thought for very verticalized and niche type of publishers that, for example, recipes or yoga fans. This type of publishers that are never well represented because they don't have enough sales force. They are not well recognized, but they could actually have very well engaged users that could actually provide then outcomes and conversions for the buyers. And this is a really value that I think curation can bring to the table.
Yeah, I was talking with my previous guest about this actually. So I've also got the grey hairs and the 25 plus years. So I remember when digital advertising was sold non-programmatically, like media agencies would come to a publisher, they'd do a deal, then they go to the next publisher and do a deal and do, so what typically happened is there was quite a small number, relatively speaking, of different URLs on any given plan. And then when programmatic happened, you might go from having 100 or 50 publishers on a plan to 5,000. And it feels like firstly from PMPs and then with curation that we're coming back the other way again and thinking that's not the right approach to have access to everything and try to like sniff all of the inventory, as we used to call it, in working in when I was working at an SSP. It's much better to look at a much smaller amount of inventory, and it feels like that's the way that the industry is going.
It is going in that direction. But in order to get to the smaller portion, you need to listen to the traffic. Because if you just use this approach, which could bring back the inclusion list or white list, that's the word they called before, right? This is, again, another static approach, right? Just buy from these 100, 200, 500 top publishers that are very well recognized in the world. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's not a wrong approach, but it's a limited approach. If you start to have the right partner to work with that could afford, technically speaking, from a cost perspective, to listen to the old traffic, continue to onboard and regenerate the type of inventory that they're working with, and then based on the algorithmical approach, the traffic shaping, reduce back and remove the waste, and basically do it in real time and enrich this data, then the optimized bid stream that is a result of that is much smaller, as you said before, but it constantly changes and
much higher proportion of that smaller is relevant to
absolutely.
That
it's about relevancy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Relevancy, context, and the ultimately performance of outcomes that actually come out of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned AI and machine learning there in terms of helping you to do all of this. Where does the AI start and the human stop? How much of this is a human looking at on a placement by placement basis, and this is good, this is not good, whatever, and how much of it is like literally the machines?
I think we have a hybrid approach on that. So humans are still needed, especially when it comes to setting goals and strategy. But then when it comes to having the scale and the adaptability, of the machines, this is where the AI and machine learning comes in. So placement optimization, bid stream optimization, everything happens behind the scenes algorithmically. The humans are using the Curation platform, which is a self-service platform, very easy to use, very intuitive, and this actually helps the buyers, the traders at the agency, at the data provider, depending on the client that we are working with, to have the strategic and the goals in their hands. And then they let the machine run behind the scenes. So it's a hybrid approach that actually complements each other. The more we're going to move into the future, the more the machines and the AI obviously will take space, probably, I'm pretty sure. But I think the human element is always important to really have, an eye on what the machines are providing and doing, right? Because I think it's, for now at least, it still seems to be working in a good way.
Because there's been fairly high profile cases of fraud and stuff in the industry, hasn't there, where somebody's inserted themselves into the bid stream, and if humans aren't looking at it, the machines haven't noticed.
Absolutely,
and then ads appear next to child abuse. Like most recently, I think the analytics report was showing that that was happening. There's been the big scandal that YouTube had a few years ago where it was funding terrorism. So there still needs to be that human eye and keeping an eye on the machines, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So one of the obvious, I suppose, features of what you're talking about is certainly on the DSP front is that there's fewer ad calls. So I'm assuming that fewer ad calls means lower carbon emissions and better for the planet, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we've been always thinking about, based on the fact that we are removing 60% of the inventory that comes our way before it gets processed and goes to the DSP, that we were very carbon emission friendly. But until we started to measure that, it was just an assumption on our side. So we started to work with a carbon emission company called Sedara actually a year ago. And we started to onboard and connect all our data in real time to Sedara. And it took a few months before we started to get the results of that. And it's I think we are very proud because now we have the number in our hands that actually says that we are 94% more efficient than the average, the industry average. So the amount of carbon emissions that we have is, I think it's 0.27 grams of CO2 per ad impression compared to 4.27, which is the industry average. and it's not a surprise on our side, but it's good to see that there is actually now an app that actually certifies that doing things right from an advertising outcome perspective also improves the carbon emission footprint that we have on the planet, which is also really, really good.
Fantastic. Yeah, has to be.
To be totally honest, I mean, carbon emissions, I think my expectation, based on the fact of what we see around us in the world, could have been much of a bigger thing in terms of programmatic advertising, in terms of much more interest in working with the companies that have this type of efficiency. The reality is that we are not there yet. But it's good to be ready, at least.
Do you feel that sustainability is like a tick box that it's good to have, but people don't make a decision based on it?
Yes.
If you have it, then that's great. But if you don't, if you deliver the performance, then
exactly.
you will sort of.
For now, it's still in. Yeah.
Okay. Does it make DSPs more efficient? Does it basically mean that they can do their jobs better because they're not being overloaded by every ad call in the world?
Absolutely.
And so they can be a lot more selective and better at their jobs with the impressions they do see? Absolutely.
This is exactly what we just mentioned. So DSPs have a limited amount of traffic they can listen. Listening meaning discovering, right? And so if you have these limits, it's like having two walls, right? You cannot go beyond the walls. The walls are there. And so the problem is that in order to really understand what's out there, you need to have a strategy when it comes to how many partners do you work with, and how many, and for each partner, meaning each SSP that you work with, how much traffic do you allow yourself to listen to, right? And I think Jones Media has explained that very well in many of the webinars that Chris Kane has done in the past. Is it better to listen to fewer pipes but fat, or multiple pipes but thin? And his approach is better fat pipes and fewer ones, which I think is the right approach altogether.
But there's a lot of duplication. If you do have lots of thin pipes, you're getting the same traffic from lots of different SSPs quite often, right?
Exactly. But on top of that, I think it's not just about thin and fat. It's about also what type of bid stream is within that pipe, how it's been optimized by what type of technology, what type of results this is bringing. And this, I think, is an interesting, a little bit deeper type of technical conversation that we typically have with DSPs. And the partners that we work with are typically very happy because of again, as I said before, the return on investment. As soon as we connect a new demand partner, a new DSP, the speed of return on investment in terms of how much value do we bring to the table back is super quick, because again, our machine actually learns very fast and optimizes the traffic in real time all the time, and this means that the DSP can actually optimize the QPS in a very good way. And typically they start with a limited QPS that they allocate to us, and after they start to open up more, and this brings a fatter pipe, obviously, because they see that actually it makes sense to invest more in what actually brings value.
It's really interesting. So final thought, if I can ask you to dust off your crystal ball and look into the future, how do you think Curation is going to play out over the next couple of years?
Wow. First of all, I think Curation is here to stay. Not because I'm working on a company that has Curation, because I think we have done Curation for 10 years. And now big players like Google has launched his own proposition on Curation. There are multiple companies talking about Curation. So Curation, I think, is here to stay, is a pillar of programmatic that actually is here to stay. But the evolution of Curation, I think there are two interesting elements that could happen. One is something that we are already working on, which is bringing at the center of Curation outcomes, business outcomes. Because at the end of the day, quality is important. It's really important. Context is really important too. But advertisers and buyers want outcome. They want to have good return on investment on what they spend in programmatic. And the problem of that is that usually the two brains that work in programmatic, the brain of the DSP and the brain of the SSP, have been always detached. They don't talk to each other. They have different logics. They try to work together, but they don't talk to each other. Now there is a real opportunity that we're working on. I hope we can announce something in the next couple of months. Is basically putting in connection these two brains and basically start to use advertisers' data to infer what the curation platform basically thinks and does in order to optimize the outcomes of the advertisers. And this actually brings a data loop in motion, and this could definitely bring real concrete results on top of the carbon emissions, on top of the bid density, on top of multiple other KPIs that we already bring into the table, also something that is really tangible for the advertisers. And maybe even going further, what's the ecosystem will look like in a few years' time? It seems to me that, the two areas, the demand side and the supply side, are starting to converge at the center somehow. And curation seems to be the center that could bring both areas together somehow. I hope that there will be more simplification in the way programmatic works, because there's too much complexity still in the ecosystem. And curation could definitely bring like a sell-side decisioning to the table, and the DSP could still have definitely a big role in terms of planning, in terms of omni-channel planning, allocation of budgets. But the decision seems to be now moving more towards the sell side rather than the demand side. Not because the DSP doesn't have a good technology, but simply because the market is evolving towards the sell side because of privacy regulations, because of progressive signal loss, because of multiple reasons. The more you are closer to the supply, meaning closer to the final user, the better the decisioning happens and the more value you can bring back to the demand side.
Yeah. So if you were to, I know that I said that was final thoughts, but I've got one more if I may. If you were back in your publisher days now and curation was as it is today, how would you be thinking about curation as a publisher?
I would be questioning curation in terms of, I would be careful in terms of understanding who do we work with, why do we work with certain type of players and others. So I will be asking lots of questions to understand why and if I should connect with a certain type of player. There are in order to make curation really work, as I said before, you need to own somehow, in brackets, the supply. There are multiple players in the industry that tap into multiple different technologies. They work more like sales houses, which is good. I mean, they're providing a service for agencies or for brands direct, but they don't typically own the direct connection to the supply. So I think doing that, I think it's important, understanding if you're working with someone that has real tech meaning machine learning, AI technology, and a big investment in data science to really have an algorithmical approach that could unlock the value that is hidden in your supply that you are not able to promote and sell accordingly, right? I think it's important. And at the end of the day, you need to look at the numbers. Is this curation bringing me diversified revenue, diversified type of advertisers, additional revenue, bid density, CPMs, yield management, all this type of data that a publisher typically looks at? It's important to really question and understand. And I think some players would bring value, some others may not bring value. So I think it's important to always be on the scrutiny side to understand who's really a good player to work with and who's maybe not.
Yeah. So do you help publishers to understand the quality of their inventory so that they can improve their inventory? Because if I'm a publisher and I send you my inventory and you basically get rid of 60% of it before you then put it in front of, you enrich it and put it in front of buyers, then do you help me understand why that 60% isn't in the 40% and what I can do about that?
It's a really good question. And we've been thinking about that because we had several conversations with publishers exactly about that, right? Could we give some insights back to the publishers? We don't have a solution ready for that, but we are thinking about that because I think the relationship with publishers shouldn't be just about a check at the end of the month. This is really important, obviously. You need to provide revenue. But I think providing insights to really understand things that they may not be able to see because of the technology that you're using could be even more valuable because they could actually have a strategic approach into how to go to market.
Those insights meant that next month you only put 50% aside and then the month after that only 40% aside. That's all money, isn't it?
Absolutely. And also you can, start to think about your content strategy. How do you revisit your sites? How do you promote that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it could bring a lot of value. We are thinking about that. Yeah.
Cool. Very good. Filippo, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for coming in, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Cheers.